You want to know why America, a so-called ally of India, seems to openly favor Pakistan in strategic affairs? It's not because Pakistan shares American values. It's not because it's a beacon of democracy or a symbol of stability. No, it's much colder than that. It's about location, logistics, and leverage. That's the real currency in geopolitics. It ain't personal, it's power. See, we like to think the world runs on justice, fairness, and morality, that decisions are made in shiny halls with high ideals. But behind closed doors, where the real conversations happen, what matters is who sits where, who holds what, and how fast they can move when the dominoes fall. Pakistan, for all its internal turmoil, holds a key seat at the table. It borders Afghanistan, China, and Iran, three of America's most complex geopolitical puzzles. You can't play the game without understanding the board, and Pakistan geographically is right in the middle of it. Let's rewind to when the U.S. was fighting its longest war in Afghanistan. Who do you think gave access to supply routes, intelligence channels, and forward operations? Who let drones fly in and out of its airspace under quiet deals? It wasn't India. It was Pakistan. Whether America trusts Pakistan or not is beside the point. In geopolitics, you don't need a friend. You need access. And Pakistan gave that time and again. Every time a supply convoy crossed the Khyber Pass or a drone launched from an airbase that didn't officially exist, Pakistan proved its value, not as a moral ally, but as a strategic one. Now you might ask, but what about India, a democracy, a rising economy, a partner in climate change, space exploration, technology? And you'd be right, India checks every box that Washington claims to value. But here's the uncomfortable truth. India doesn't always play ball. It buys oil from Russia. It refuses to be bullied into Western narratives. It charts its own path. And in the eyes of Washington's power brokers, independence is inconvenient. You start thinking for yourself, they start thinking twice about you. Meanwhile, Pakistan, with all its contradictions, is easier to mold when the money flows and the stakes are high. It's a transactional relationship, one built on needs, not ideals. America needs a route into the underbelly of Central Asia. It needs leverage against growing Chinese influence through the China-Pakistan economic corridor. It needs to keep a watchful eye on Iran's doorstep. And for all those needs, Pakistan sits at the right crossroads. So don't be fooled by the smiles and diplomatic photo ops or the handshakes at summits. Look deeper. America's open support for Pakistan isn't born out of loyalty. It's born out of necessity. You don't have to trust someone to use them. And in international politics, usefulness outweighs trust every time. What we're seeing isn't a betrayal of India. It's the exposure of a long-standing truth. In global affairs, values come second to value. And in that equation, Pakistan still holds a few chips. America isn't ready to cash out just yet. That's the reality whether we like it or not. You want to understand why America keeps backing Pakistan, even when the world sees India as the more stable, democratic, and economically powerful nation. Follow the money. This isn't about brotherhood or shared values. This is about business, the kind of business that never sleeps. The military-industrial complex in the United States is not a machine that slows down. It needs to sell, supply, and survive. And for that, it needs customers. Tense regions. Conflicts that simmer just below the boiling point. Pakistan fits that bill. You see, over decades, Pakistan has become one of the top recipients of American military. Not because it always deserved it. Not because it followed through on its promises, but because it kept the doors open. It kept the fear alive. Terrorism, Taliban, nuclear instability, those are the buzzwords that feed contracts, that keep budgets flowing through the Pentagon, through Congress, and back into the hands of defense contractors. When America ships weapons, sells helicopters, or funds training programs, there's a return. It might not show up as dollars right away, but it shows up in influence and dependence. That's the quiet part of this equation no one says out loud. Now think about India. India doesn't buy into that dependency. It buys Russian arms, it develops its own systems, it invests in indigenization. That makes it a less reliable buyer, less dependent, and more sovereign. You think that makes it more respected? Not necessarily. It makes it harder to control. And in a system where influence is more valuable than friendship, The one who plays by your rules is always the easier ally, even if they're unpredictable, even if they're unstable. Let's go a step deeper. America isn't just selling weapons, it's also shaping the battlefield. By keeping a steady stream of military support to Pakistan, it keeps a balance of power, not peace, but balance. India, naturally stronger and more stable, doesn't need aid to stand. But Pakistan, it needs support to stay in the game. And as long as that game is going, so are the contracts, the deals, and the leverage. Now you combine that with the larger picture, the game against China. This isn't checkers, it's chess, and every piece counts. America sees China as its biggest rival economically and militarily. India, with all its size and power, should be the natural ally in that fight. But here's the twist. India won't be pulled like a puppet. It maintains strong trade ties with China. It refuses to blindly follow the U.S. on sanctions or votes in the UN. That independence is respected, yes, but it's also inconvenient. So where does America look when India steps out of line? It turns to the wild card, Pakistan. Because even though Pakistan is deeply involved with China, even though it's part of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, the U.S. still tries to keep a foot in the door, not out of trust, but out of strategy. Because if you can't close the door on China, at least don't let it swing wide open. Keep some influence. Keep some connection, even if it's fragile. And that's why you see America smiling in public, shaking hands in Islamabad, sending aid packages with one hand and drone strikes with the other. It's a dance. A cold, calculated one. Pakistan offers America just enough access, just enough cooperation, to remain useful in this bigger war for influence. So while the world watches and wonders why the U.S. isn't backing its democratic partner with full force, the truth is simple. It's not about who stands taller. It's about who leans when pushed. And America never stops pushing. When you talk about America's relationship with Pakistan over India, you have to understand something deeper. This is not about friendship, not about history, not even about trust. This is about how America plays the long game in Asia, and sometimes the most unlikely ally becomes the most convenient one. Because in this 21st century power chessboard, the biggest opponent in the room isn't India, it's China. And when America looks at that map, when it studies the moves, that's a $60 billion lifeline between China and the Arabian Sea, running straight through Pakistan, a direct route that skips India entirely. And while that might sound like a Chinese win, it also makes Pakistan a critical player in this economic arms race. Now, America doesn't want to see China tighten that grip on the region. It doesn't want China to have unchecked access from Xinjiang to Gwadar. So what does it do? It steps in, not to stop the corridor, but to stay in the room, to keep talking, to maintain just enough presence in Pakistan so it's not locked out of the region completely. You see, India may be standing strong against China, may be holding the line at Doklam or along the Lak, but it's doing it alone, on its terms. It's not always in sync with American expectations. It's buying oil from Russia. It's not signing up for every Western resolution. And that independence, as admirable as it is, doesn't always serve American interests. Washington likes allies it can guide, not ones it has to negotiate with. And in the middle of all this stands Pakistan. An unpredictable, often chaotic country, but one that's easier to influence when the money and weapons flow. That's the paradox. Pakistan is working with China, yes, deeply, but it's also not above working with the U.S. if the price is right. It plays both sides, and America tolerates that because it doesn't want to lose all ground. It's a backdoor strategy. While India stands tall and proud on the front porch, America sometimes slips around to the back where the access is messier but more flexible. It doesn't mean Pakistan is trusted. It means Pakistan is available. And let's be clear, this isn't about ideology. It's about containment. America doesn't want China dominating Central Asia, dominating the Indian Ocean, dominating the tech game, the port game, the trade game. And if that means keeping Pakistan close, even while it cozies up to China, so be it. That's the cost of the game. It's frustrating, sure. For India, it feels like betrayal. For the world watching, it feels like hypocrisy. But for Washington, it's just strategy, cold, hard strategy. You don't always pick the cleanest partner. You pick the one that gets you through the door. So as long as China keeps expanding, as long as Beijing's influence stretches across railroads, pipelines, and alliances, the U.S. will keep looking for ways to stay in the fight. And if that means shaking hands with a country it doesn't fully trust, then that's exactly what it's going to do. Because in this game, access matters more than allegiance. When America left Afghanistan, it didn't just shut the door and walk away. No, sir. It left with unfinished business, with files still open, with threats still breathing under the surface. The battlefield might have gone quiet on the evening news, but the war on terror didn't end. It just moved into the shadows. And in those shadows, you need a gatekeeper. You need a back door. You need eyes on the ground. And who's been holding that position for decades, even with all its contradictions? Pakistan. Let's get something straight. Pakistan didn't become valuable to America just because of what it is. It became valuable because of where it is. After 20 years in Afghanistan, the U.S. built its entire operational model around one thing: regional access, drones, special forces, intelligence networks. All of it had to run through neighboring territories. Pakistan allowed those corridors, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes for a price, but it allowed them. It hosted supply lines. It gave quiet permission to surveillance missions. It made itself indispensable, not through trust, but through geography and cooperation, strategic cooperation. And that cooperation didn't end with the withdrawal. In fact, it became even more essential. Because once the U.S. troops left and the Taliban took over, America needed to keep tabs on what was happening inside. Terror groups don't vanish with political handovers. Al-Qaeda, ISIS-K, Haqqani network. They're still lurking. The difference now is America has no boots on the ground. So what does it need? A neighbor who will look the other way while the game continues. Now, don't get me wrong. Pakistan has played a double game before. It supported extremist elements while claiming to fight them. That's a fact. But for the U.S., that's not a deal breaker. It's a calculated risk. Because having some access to Pakistani airspace, intelligence, or terrain is better than having none. It's not about trust. It's about utility. And that's the ugly truth of modern foreign policy. So when India looks at this and asks, why not us? We're the democracy. We're the reliable partner. The answer is simple. India is not next door to Kabul. India doesn't share a 2,600-kilometer border with Afghanistan. India can offer values, but Pakistan offers access. And in this phase of the game, access is king. You think about those drone strikes that still hit targets in the tribal regions. You think about the quiet meetings that still happen in Doha or Islamabad or elsewhere. You think about where American intelligence officers still fly in under the radar. They don't fly through New Delhi. They go through the route that's been tested, even if it's compromised. Now that might sound like betrayal, but from Washington's perspective, it's chess. India might be the knight, noble, powerful, strategic. But Pakistan is the rook. It's on the edge of the board, but it controls the straight path. And when the king needs protection, the rook moves fast. This is what India has to deal with, not just an ally who praises it at conferences, but an ally who does business behind the scenes with its rival, not because it wants to, but because it thinks it has to. And that's how you get a world where values get sidelined and geography becomes policy, where the battlefield may shift, but the playbook stays the same. Because when the war ends, the games begin. In this world of diplomacy and defense, perception often carries more weight than principle. And when you look at the region through the lens of American foreign policy, one thing becomes clear. It's not always about who stands for the right cause. It's about who poses the bigger risk if ignored. That's where Pakistan comes in. See, Pakistan doesn't just have influence, it has insurance. A nuclear one. Now let's not pretend. The U.S. doesn't exactly trust Pakistan with that power. It knows the history, it knows the duplicity. But at the end of the day, when you're dealing with a nation armed with over 100 nuclear warheads, sitting in one of the world's most volatile neighborhoods, you don't take your eyes off it. You keep talking. You keep feeding the relationship, not because you believe in it, but because the cost of silence is too high. Pakistan has built its image, not as a responsible nuclear power, but as an unpredictable one. And in a strange way, that's its leverage. Because in global politics, the more unstable your house looks, the more the big players want to invest in your security, just to keep you from burning the neighborhood down. And so America engages, it placates, it funds, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. Fear that Pakistan's weapons could fall into the wrong hands. Fear that internal collapse could lead to global catastrophe. Fear that any misstep could turn a regional conflict into a worldwide crisis. India, on the other hand, holds itself with discipline. It's a nuclear state too, but one that's responsible, measured, bound by protocol. India doesn't use its arsenal as leverage, it uses it as deterrence. And ironically, that makes it less of a priority. Because from the U.S. perspective, India isn't the fire you put out, it's the pillar you lean on. And while that earns India respect, it doesn't always earn attention. Let's be real. The U.S. foreign policy machine operates heavily on the principle of crisis management, and Pakistan has positioned itself as a permanent crisis. Military coups, terror havens, religious extremism, border flare-ups, you name it. It's the perfect storm that never quite ends. And when you're constantly ringing the alarm, someone's always going to pick up the call. That's what America keeps doing. Answering the call, sending the check, keeping the line open. But India doesn't scream. India doesn't beg. The story where America can help, mediate, or rescue. Pakistan fits that role like a glove. India doesn't need rescuing, and that makes it less appealing to the savior mindset embedded in Western foreign policy. So you combine that media bias with strategic interest, military sales, nuclear anxieties, and regional access, and you get a relationship that defies logic on paper, but thrives in practice. You get support not based on who's right, but based on who fits the story better. That's why, despite truth, despite stability, despite strength, India still sees America shaking hands with the very state that undermines its sovereignty. And in a world ruled by narrative more than nuance, sometimes the wrong story wins.